If you can't look in the mirror and say this exact thing, then you're openly acknowledging that you are a coward. And this is a problem. This is not okay, and this has to be changed.
I'm going to go to my grave telling you he resurrected, and that God does not stand for this violence.
When we were 5-6 times bigger than them, something snapped in their mind.
We need to figure out, okay, well, what is the next stage of economic development that will help these people have meaningful, interesting, purposeful jobs?
Some people think that path is a race course. People think that path is, just getting this thing over with.
If only one thing exists, God exists. You could say that.
Welcome. It's Tuesday night. It's the James Fox Higgins Show, and I'm joined as ever by Sven Starfury Low. Hey Sven, how are you?
Life is grand.
Excellent. And we have a special guest hailing from Scotland, our good friend Antony Sammeroff from the Scottish Liberty podcast. How are you, Antony?
Truly excellent. All the better to be with you guys, naturally.
Excellent. Well, the vibes are clearly very good tonight. And
that's my politically correct, polite answer.
That was good. I liked it. Now, you've got a new book out, Antony. That's very exciting news.
Oh, that is true. I do have a new book out. Thanks for reminding me. I totally forgot. It's called Universal Basic Income For and Against.
Oh, good. Well, I thought we were about to have a whole bunch of triggered capitalists, but you threw in the against as well.
Right. I should add that you can get a free ebook copy from my website, beyourselfandloveit.com/UBI, because I'm a hopeless altruist and felt the need to put the ebook out for free. So I guess that's one of the things. I know, that's true. But I feel that it's really important that liberty-minded people, pro-capitalist people, get this book because it's written specifically to help us win the war of ideas. It's a bait and switch. It's a Trojan horse. I start with the arguments in favor of the universal basic income, then I explore some against it, then I go through a whole bunch of libertarian policies with figures that would alleviate poverty. And okay, there's always going to be some people who are entrenched in their particular political beliefs, but for the average-minded person, I find it really difficult to imagine them reading it and not going, wow, this makes a lot of sense. Maybe not everything, but there's definitely some. There's definitely something for everyone where they'll go, wow, yeah, that makes no sense. I talk about how the state has pushed the price of housing through the roof, how central banking has eroded the value of our currency, and how that harms the least well off. I even talk about how regulations and occupational licensing harm the poor. What's the most expensive thing you'll ever buy in your life?
Your house.
See, you'd think that, wouldn't you? But no, it's actually the government. Most people in the UK most people work 20 to 25 years to pay off, for the government. So I talk about stuff like that. I talk about free trade.
That's a really great way to frame it economically for people to understand when guys like Stefan Molyneux will say that, it's partial slavery, that it's,
right.
Like 100% slavery, everyone agrees is wrong, but somehow we've arrived at 25% or 50% slavery and we're okay with that. So this is a major libertarian argument against government.
And we're not only okay with it, it's the price of civilization.
To frame it even another way as well that might be useful is to show people that they're actually the customers of the government. And if you got the kind of service that we get from governments, from like a corporation or a shop or a restaurant or something, like we'd be fucking disgusted. So
they'd go out of business very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why government is so bad. I mean, if Starbucks were the only people who were able to provide a coffee, I don't think you'd expect a very good coffee at a very good price. Even with all the intentions in the world, even if there's good people working in government agencies to try and make them efficient and do a good job, what have they got to compare what they're doing to? You know, they can't copy innovations by other people in the same sector because they're the only show in town.
Yeah. So there's just no incentive for improvement.
I was just on the line to the Australian Tax Office yesterday to sort some stuff out, and on hold for ages. I wrote the Facebook post that their hold music is clearly designed to inspire customer suicide. But I was thinking at the end, I wonder if I'll get one of those, like feedback surveys where they'll ask me, how their service was. And I realised, no, of course they fucking won't. They don't care if I like their service or not. They just want the money.
Right, because you can't take your business elsewhere. And that's one of the main motivations for an organisation to do a good job. Their customers will go elsewhere. They'll vote with their feet if they don't provide a reasonably good service.
Yep. Indeed. So we've got a lot to talk about tonight, and I would like to get into some of the arguments for and against universal basic income in a little bit. But we've also got some rather alarming news from Australia with the recent DEFCON 1 music festival in Sydney, and we'll get right into that. There were a couple of deaths, drug-related deaths, and the state premier of New South Wales has in response come out and said she intends to ban the event from the state and make sure it never happens again. And she's gone straight to, let's just get into it. She's gone straight from 2 people dying of drug overdoses and, like many hundreds of cases of people being caught with drugs and being arrested and charged. I think there were 8 or there were several overdoses that resulted in hospitalizations and 2 deaths that I'm aware of. But she's gone straight from that out of, 100,000 or 80,000 people, a huge event, that a tiny proportion of them have made poor individual choices and resulted in their deaths. And now she's punishing the event organisers, the DJs and the music producers, the food vendors, all of the people who benefit economically from the event, who have nothing to do with those poor decisions being made other than the fact that it's a dance music festival and drugs go well with dance music. So is that Antony, do you think that's a reasonable solution to ban the event?
Well, it's a ritual human sacrifice, James. I mean, if we want 80 to 100,000 people to have a good time, we need to make some sacrifices. And if anything, we just throw them on the pyre. And, we...
Well, I think the answer is they don't want 80 to 100,000 people to have a good time now.
Okay. Yeah, so what I would say is, obviously, well, what level do you want to start at? One thing is maybe the fact that drugs are prohibited caused this because, you pop a couple of pills, you're having a good time, you start to not feel so good. If the drugs weren't prohibited, you might go straight to a security person and say, hey, like I've had a couple of ecstasies, I was having a good time for a while, but now I'm feeling really bad, like I've drunk water, nothing's helped, and I'm kind of freaking out. And they might take you to a medic, whereas if you know that it's prohibited, you don't want to get embarrassed, you don't want to get chucked out, you don't want to go to jail, you don't want your friends to get in trouble, so you just keep it to yourself, and the next thing you know, something breaks down inside and you end up in hospital, or in the sad case of these 2 people end up dead.
No, it's tragic. And I mean, the war on drugs has been a massive failure for the 50 years or whatever they've been trying to do it since the 60s or 70s. And as usual with most government policies, they're only trying to cure the symptoms of something that's much deeper. And frankly, I think like all all habitual drug use is in the end like self-medicating, probably early childhood trauma, which maybe you, Antony, might be able to speak more about. So I don't see these policies actually helping the situations. People have done drugs forever. Humans have always sought ways to modify their consciousness, so that's not going to change. But,
Now, a bit of a throwaway line from you there, Sven, but I should let people know, anyone watching who doesn't know Antony, not only is he an avid economist and a writer on economic issues and a host of the Scottish Liberty podcast, but he's also a counsellor with a great deal of experience working with people and their personal issues and crises that they face. Tell us a little bit about your background there, Antony, and we'll certainly delve into the psychological tonight as well.
Yeah, what I do for a living is I'm a therapist. I also do some coaching, and some people come from for a combination of both. And yeah, I'm deeply interested in psychology. I put out a episode of the Scottish Liberty podcast called The Psychology of Statism, where I explored my views on the links between the two. I guess I'm interested in human well-being, human flourishing, and human freedom. And one aspect of that is obviously political liberty, because you can't rise to your full potential without freedom, without outer freedom. But as the more I go along, the more I see that the main limits on people are the inner shackles, the inner state that oppresses them. The word state's a very interesting word, isn't it? Because it does actually, this is getting a little bit Jordan Peterson in your ass with the several levels of meaning in a word. Like, what is a state? A state is something that doesn't move and is solid, and it's also all-encompassing. It's the state of things, right? And it is true. The state is slow moving, and the the private sector is fast moving, and things change quickly. And I feel like I see that as analogous to our inner environment, where there's all these habits and parts of our personality that are very fixed and slow to move and can take a long time to change, and a lot of the time they drag us back. They want us to be secure. We're adapted to an environment. What makes human beings so successful as a species is our uncanny ability, which outmatches any other species, to adapt to our environment, but also to adapt our environment to ourselves. Now, as adults, as free individuals, the most evolved part of us seeks to adapt our environment to ourselves. I'm not comfortable, I'll make more money and move to another house. I'll try and get a partner that suits me. I'm trying to get a bunch of friends that I can socialize with. I want a shed to work on. I'll make a shed, or I'll make more money. We're trying to create an environment for us to flourish, okay? When we're kids, we don't have any control over our environment, or very little, depending on how repressive our parents are. And what happens then is we start to adapt ourselves to our environment instead of adapt the environment to ourselves, because the fetus doesn't know if it's going to be born here in Scotland, there in Australia, in Saudi Arabia, in China. So it's got that if I was born in Saudi Arabia, I'd be having this conversation in Arabic, right? Because I'd adapt to my environment. So when we can adapt to our environment, we adapt ourselves to an environment, and we retain all sorts of defenses and structures and personality traits or adaptations. I call which we could call, our inner state. Yeah. Our inner state, right?
I see what you did there.
Right. So no, because I think this is all. I don't think that the use of language is. I think that our use of language is deliberate, and there's reasons why certain words have several meanings and certain resonances and get applied to certain things. We could talk about that for ages, because words are a psychological phenomenon. The mind, on the most fundamental level, is pre-verbal. It works in pictures and notions and symbols. So when you dream, like, a symbol in a dream can have so many meanings. So I think, I'm being clever with words and saying you can call this your state, but I don't think it's a coincidence that we call states, we call governments states either. So basically, what was adapted to an environment where you didn't have much control might not necessarily be adapted to yourself as an adult. So what served you as a child doesn't serve you as an adult. If you're too assertive as a child, people might call you fresh or cheeky. They punish you for being self-confident. Whereas when you're an adult, you can't get ahead of the work in the workplace. You're too shy to ask for a promotion. You're too shy to ask the girl that you always talk to at the water cooler out, and whatever, because you've inherited a bunch of stuff from being a little kid that no longer serves you as an adult. You're adapting to your environment instead of an environment you're no longer in, instead of looking around and adapting your environment to yourself. And I guess that's where I'm coming from, where the fundamental practice that I'm in is helping people loosen up their personalities a bit and get out of the solid state into the more fluid, free, being able to make the decisions that they want, being able to act on their desires without holding themselves back, and their desire to create something, to do something important with their life, and what have you. So and I can
personally vouch for your methods as well.
Right.
I've come to you for counselling in the past. That was how we first met. I don't come to you for counselling anymore, but it was very, very helpful at a difficult time in my life. So anyone who is interested in Antony's services should get in touch with him. Where's the best place people can reach you for that service?
Yeah, you can email me, Antony@beyourselfandloveit.com, or send me a Facebook message. That might be the easiest way. I stay reasonably on top of Facebook messages, and that's how a lot of people who find me through my shows tend to connect with me.
Excellent. So you can just search for Antony Sammeroff, copy-paste the name from the title of this video into Facebook. Let's bring it back to drugs, and let's talk about how is the use of drugs, and maybe I'd be interested in hearing from you on this, Sven, because I think you've got some experiences to share from that world of dance music festivals and that sort of thing. That's a subculture you've been part of. How is it that taking drugs, like ecstasy, which is a popular party drug, how is that adapting the environment, to better suit the emotional needs of people, or how is that adapting the self to the environment? What's the interplay there between self and environment that causes people to take drugs so prevalently at these festivals?
Well, I mean, basically they feel good, man. It's like that thing about technically the only two things you enjoy are serotonin and dopamine, right? And all these amphetamines, all they're doing is flooding the brain with the happy hormones that are already there. So I heard Jordan Peterson actually say recently, the question is not why do people take drugs? The question is, why don't people take drugs?
All the time.
That's a good point. All the time.
That's right. If you have a button that you can just smash and get free dopamine, like, why would you not be smashing that button? So,
but it's not just a button you can repeatedly hit, though. There are diminishing returns and there are consequences.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but you'd be surprised how far you can push it before you hit rock bottom, and lots of people do. But and other than that, like the way I know, for me at least, I'm a highly disagreeable person, and I heard all my life, don't do drugs, and drugs are evil, coming from this, authoritarian monolith, and I always doubted what people in authority said. So making things illegal, like the forbidden fruit tastes best. So it's unsurprising people interested in these things.
Yeah, and there's so much to say about drugs. I mean, that idea of just smashing the dopamine button over and over again. What they used to think that that drugs were more addictive than they are, because they did an experiment with mice or rats where they had a lever and they could push it. They could push the lever and get some, I don't know if it was coke or morphine or something, and in the original experiments, they just do it over and over again. So they're like, whoa, I mean, they're getting really addicted to this stuff. But it turns out that in the original experiments, they were just in really tiny cages and they didn't have anything to do and they were bored as hell. When they actually put them in big environments where there was other animals to play with, there was wheels, there was food, there was all sorts to do. They weren't keen on it. They might take it occasionally, but they weren't keen to go. And I think that's there's Gabor Mate in The Realm of the Hungry Ghost. That's a famous text, and you can see some of his. I agree with you that a lot of drug taking is basically self-medication, and I mean a traumatic childhood can really screw up your serotonin levels, and what you find is that people who are really susceptible to drug addiction feel about normal when they take drugs. They maybe feel normal for the first time in their lives. I mean, I've had some experiments and thought, wow, geez, is this what I'd be like? They say on ecstasy, I can't take drugs recreationally because I'm just so introspective that even if I was out at a rave with you, Sven, as soon as I popped a pill, 2 hours later, I'd be like, I've got to go home, man. I've just got to go home and have to journal. I've got to tidy my room. I used to say that.
Let me tell you this, man. Yeah. Let me tell you this. Like I've told James often that I become an outcast in any group that I'm in. And while at raves, I used to bring my journal and I'd be sitting on the stage at the front and writing in it. So I can totally relate to that.
That's such a funny position to take too, Sven, because you're not just going home to journal like Antony would. You're sitting at the front of the stage. Journaling with an audience.
I've still got those journals. I'll show them to you. They're actually like drips of sweat that are on there. That I'm sure if you did some analysis on the sweat, you would find some of those amphetamine molecules in there. But
depends on the half-life, I suppose.
Good times. Yeah, I'd be there licking in my journal.
Yeah, I mean,
yourself.
I made the joke. I used to say that to people before Jordan Peterson emerged, like, oh, I can't take an ecstasy out, man. I'd have to go home and tidy my room, which is really ironic now that I think about it. But actually, there's this view that if people take drugs, they're going to get addicted to it, and I was surprised to find that it tends to be about 10% of people that are susceptible to addiction for any particular chemical. And we have a perception that if we kidnapped James, Sven, and we shot him up with smack for 2 weeks, that he'd necessarily leave being an addict. That's not the case, just because certain people have a predilection, they have a susceptibility to addiction to certain chemicals, and that might be due to trauma, or there probably is a degree of genetic factors, but probably even so with genetic factors, without the trauma, there's nothing to pull the trigger.
So the epigenetic factors in that case.
Yeah. I'm lucky that I don't have an addicted personality, but I'm probably addictive in other ways. Like I've got little obsessive compulsive disorders, like if I pick under one nail, I feel like the desperate urge to pick under the other ones, and things like that. People have addictive behaviors that they don't realize are addictive. It's just that substance use is one of the most prominent ones. And coming back to your point on the drug war failing, we don't like that, let's just ban it. It's the lowest level of mentality, the lowest level of thinking. Some of the best pharmacists in the world work in Amsterdam for the illegal drugs industry, because that's where the money is. So what you've just basically missed out on is 50 or 60 years of corporations. They really don't like killing their customers, do you know what I mean? Working to make drugs safer and safer with the least amount of side effects, because that's what they'd be researching to do. Not to mention the psychotherapeutic angle, which I'm sure you've heard of, and now they're doing trials on psilocybin from mushrooms.
Previously,
and MDMA. Before ecstasy got banned, it was used in helping people overcome childhood trauma. It was used in couples counselling, because obviously it connects you to the heart space, and couples were able to hear things that they weren't maybe able to hear without the aid of the chemical. There was like an old folks home where they'd give people ecstasy maybe once every 6 months, MDMA, and that would perk them up for about 6 months. They'd get an afterglow from it. So the therapists that were using it were very encouraged, and we're going back to the 60s or so now, and they were fearful that it would get banned, and of course it did. So we've lost out on the possibility of using substance as psychotherapeutically in 60 years of research into how that might be done effectively and safely.
So on the subject of prohibition, there's an interesting article in news.com.au on this exact event, the DEFCON 1 event and the deaths. So the Premier Gladys Berejiklian, I think that's how you pronounce the name, but I like to call her Buried Jekyll Killjoy. We'll go with that. But this article reads that doctors have slammed the New South Wales government's head in the sand approach to drugs at music festivals after 2 people died. And Dr. Nicole Lee works in drug and alcohol policy and said that pill testing had to be in place to keep young people who would experiment with drugs regardless safe. And she said, quote, "These kids died because of prohibition. More prohibition is not going to solve this problem. Young people will experiment and we may or may not agree with those choices, but they shouldn't die because of them." Dr. Lee wrote that on social media.
She's sounding dangerously like a libertarian. I mean,
well, so those pill testing kits, they do work, and you could just buy them from like the record stores. And this was like 15 years ago when I was in the rave, nearly 20 years ago when I was in the rave scene in Brisbane, and they cost like $5, and they were just a little bit of powder that. They were a little bit of liquid that you would scrape a little bit of your pill off, and it would change color. And if it was black, you knew it was actually MDMA, and it would turn different colors to indicate that there was, different like filler substances in there. So that was really safe to do. And I've also been to Boom Festival in Portugal, which is 50,000 people. It's like a week long. It's like in the middle of nowhere around this massive lake sort of thing. And Portugal did, I think it's close to 10 years ago now that they decriminalized drugs, basically, and they have implemented all these harm minimization protocols. And at this festival, remember 50,000 people, they just had a massive stall with a huge line, and people were just lining up with their bags of drugs, and it was all legit. You would go there and test it. There was no questions asked. And incidentally, DEFCON, I think it was just 10,000. No, it's 30,000 people. That's actually, okay. So 2 from 30,000. But I'm pretty sure that year of Boom Festival, amongst 50,000 people, there were no deaths there. And I mean, this place was loose as, we were camped out there, and just not too far from us, there were a couple of Israeli dudes with some bouncers set up, and that was like, come here and buy your drugs. It was just total free market. Like, it was just so open. It was quite eye-opening, frankly. But there's ways to do this. And the other thing I wanted to
ties in well from a question from one of our viewers who wrote, how do people in the EU manage to have music events and drugs and not kill themselves? And there's one answer for you, is that there's legitimate ways to. That was Charlie Brown, by the way. Hey, Charlie, thanks for joining us tonight.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown.
Another thing I wanted to bring up is I saw, like, reading some of the articles around from this, that 43% of Australians admit to using illicit substances, and it might even be higher than that, the people that didn't say so. And the quote
definitely be under-reporting on that.
Right. The quote from the Premier that I saw, the Premier of New South Wales, is that there is no. Anyone who advocates pill testing is giving the green light to drugs. There is no such thing as a safe drug, and unfortunately, when young people think that there is, it has tragic consequences. Now, this is
Says
always
someone who's never ever taken a pharmaceutical in their life. I'm sure. Never taken anything for a headache.
Yeah, it's a real head in the sand. It's just such a load of bullshit. Although on that exact topic, sorry to butt in, Sven, you carry on in a sec, but one of our viewers, Naughty Design, is pushing back a bit on YouTube and just said the fact that there is a need to test their stash is telling. Do I have to test my paracetamol at home?
Exactly.
And so,
good point. Really good point.
But it could be that if if we manage the pharmaceutical, if we manage the party drug industry in the way that we manage the pharmaceutical industry.
Sure.
or in a similar way, or even in a more free market way, there are other possibilities other than just banning events. So, Sven, you carry on.
What was I saying?
No, I derailed you, man. Sorry.
Yeah.
So what are some of the possibilities that have not yet been tried, or that are being tried in the radically libertarian states, on drugs anyway? There are some states in the world that are much more free market oriented on drugs. I think Portugal, as you mentioned, and places like that. What are they doing other than having testing facilities? What are the manufacturers doing?
I don't have any facts on that. I know in some places, say for heroin, now this is obviously a state program, but so it wouldn't be my first choice of way of doing it, but it's still better than what states that ban it do, which is they just had places for people who were heroin addicts to go and shoot up, and they provided the kit. They provided the drug, and they go, well, what's the government doing giving people free drugs? Well, the thing is, a large percentage of them gave up after a while.
Because the government drugs were so bad?
It was because part of what was driving their addiction was uncertainty over whether they'd get where or how or when they'd get the next hit. So they're always anxious, like, oh, am I going to get this or am I not going to get it? Like, okay, well, I've got a chance to take it now, so I'm going to take it now because I don't know if I'll have it later. Once they knew that they could reliably shoot up, they didn't have that anxiety. They might do that for a while, and then, I can't remember the percentage, but it's just a Google away. Like, this isn't something obscure. It's a well-known thing. I think it was, I can't remember where it was, actually. I think there's I'm not really a huge advocate of recreational drug use. I mean, people go on about cannabis a lot, and yeah, it's like, grow up. Do you know what I mean? Cannabis is everywhere. Like, people are so square about it. You mentioned before Elon Musk took a toke of a joint on Joe Rogan podcast. Seriously, there's like thousands of people dying in Yemen right now due to the US, but all you've got to talk about is, like, how square are you? And I also, by the same token, I really hate it when I meet folks and they're all like, yeah, I'm going back home to smoke a joint, and they think they're so fucking cool because they smoke a joint. Do you know what? No one gives a shit, right? No one gives a shit.
It's not edgy anymore.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think that you're cool for smoking a joint. And I meet people like that. Well, I used to. But in Glasgow all the time, it's like, dude, I've seen people smoking a joint since I was 16 years old.
It's
nothing new.
It was edgy in 1952, but it's not now.
Right, but also, I don't think that dope is I don't think that marijuana is like an evolving drug for people. I think it's a really bad habit. I think it makes people completely comfortable with being bored and doing nothing with their life. And I've seen so many people in my 20s who had creative aspirations, right? And the fact that they weren't doing anything with them tortured them. So they just smoke a joint and then they'd feel comfortable watching movies instead. I had a friend who says that smoking marijuana ruined their life, basically, because, when they first started smoking it, they got so creative. But before that, they used to write and they used to draw even when they weren't high. But after a while, they only did it when they're high. So there's all this stuff about marijuana being harmless is absolute horseshit. And it's not the same dope that you used to get in the 60s. It's all genetically modified and selectively bred to be stronger. But I'm not willing to stop anyone, even though I think it's kind of lame smoking it. Like, it's okay, like, obviously at a party or once in a while, but people who smoke it every day, I think it's lame. I think it's lame as fuck. But I'm not willing to stop you from doing it, and I'd rather it was legal so that people who had these problems didn't have to go to some like crappy government drug counselling. They offer them really crap drug counselling that barely but it would be known, it would be a bigger thing. And people who had these problems, because it was in the open, things would emerge to help people who thought they had that kind of problem. And because it wasn't cool and edgy, because it was illegal, like, I mean, sorry, I could talk about this stuff for ages, but like mental health services, I've had so many people come to me that have gone through the official channels for mental health services and basically been put off counselling or psychotherapy. But, you know, if not for the state basically propping people up who can't get their shit together to the welfare state and things like that, there would be more people going to get help. And with more people going to get help, there would be more of because they need to. Do you know what I mean? It's not like the government's going to go, well, you're a loser, so we're going to give you tons of welfare or a free flat or something like that. It'd be like, you kind of need to get off your ass and get your shit together on a free market. So more people would look for help, and there would be better help available. I feel like what we've got is a culture that keeps people stuck and is willing to pay people to be stuck at the expense of people who are actually doing productive work on behalf of others. But of course, I'm just a heartless neoliberal for saying that.
So let's talk about the market forces that are involved in the drug trade, because if we were in a free market environment where we were looking to the market for our solutions instead of, you know, punitive measures from the state to prevent drug deaths, such as what happened at DEFCON 1, you know, the thing is, I had a thought recently about counsellors such as yourself, is that it's if you are taking money from people who are unwell, you know, who need help, right? Your financial incentive is for them to stay unwell. So it takes a great deal of integrity to choose at the outset to go, I want to help you and make myself obsolete as quickly as possible.
Sure.
So that you get the maximal benefit of my services, and then you're trusting that the good quality of service you provide will lead to other customers. But there are people out there, like some very sick psychologists out there who keep their patients addicted to them and who want them to keep coming back more and more and more. And you could compare that to the drug dealers that we see today, who don't want their customers to die because then they'd lose their stream of income. But it would be better, the financial incentive is there for them to want their customers to be taking drugs every single day. I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
What do you think of that concern that people have that leads them to look to the state to punish drug dealers? And why aren't they punishing psychologists and counsellors?
Right. Well, I mean, I doubt that there's that many psychotherapists that are consciously trying to keep their patients poor, in a poor condition, so they keep. There's just a ton of fucking shit psychotherapists. I mean, I think. Sorry, I'm going to get into trouble for saying one of these things online one of these days. Do you know that?
Just but don't nowadays, name names and you'll be fine.
Yeah, nowadays a controversy does wonders for your online profile. So maybe that'll be a good thing. But right, okay. Yeah, but this is kind of coming back to the Homo economicus, which is the theory in economics that people are like rational economic animals and always make decisions on their self-interest, and that's blatantly not true. I mean, people go into the military, people have kids, which is a massive drain on resources, and the stats say you're not likely to be more happy having kids than live, but that's probably just because you're all crap parents. Not you guys, but most people are, so they don't enjoy.
You know, as a parent, I have my moments, you know, where it's like really fucking hard, you know, to be a parent.
Yeah,
it's not easy. But you know, the net benefits are absolutely there for my.
Yeah, part. I mean. Freaking, I wish I had my shit together when I was in my early 20s so I could be married with kids by now. Like, why the fuck do you think I became a psychologist, man? I had to start... The first patient was me, right? So it's an interesting thing, but no, of course, like, my job satisfaction is seeing people improve. I mean, one of the reasons why I went into personal development is because I saw a need for it. Like, I started teaching piano because I thought it would be good money on the side while I was going to uni, but I saw I was good at it. I was better at explaining music concepts than any of my piano tutors were. So I was like, okay, I see a need for that. Same with going into psychotherapy. Like my parents were terrible communicators. I got into communication skills. I started teaching about that. I saw the benefits in my life. I wanted to teach it. I saw a need for it. I never thought I'd write about economics. Like, what the hell? You know, when I was in school, primary school, and the teacher said, Antony, what do you want to be when you grow up? I didn't go, I want to be a counsellor and an economist, miss. No, do you know what? It never entered my mind. But when I started reading the books that libertarians were recommending on economics, I saw a gap in the market for explaining these concepts in the way that I think would have converted me when I was a lefty. So I started writing to the left, and that's how I got. So most of what I've done in my life has been, I mean, professionally, has been in terms of what I see as necessary. And this is kind of coming back to the self-satisfaction. Like, I think if you're, it's also market facing, and we can bring it back to UBI and this idea of automation. See if automation is going to kill jobs. See if you get really good at anything, or even not even really good. If you just get good at anything, you'll start seeing tons of things that other people aren't doing that you see a need for. It's only people who are unskilled who think that we're going to start running out of jobs. I know I've gone like way on a tangent, but I don't know, man. I've just got this
more than one, man.
So that's cool, man.
And to, machine. It's like to
bring it back. We're talking about the incentives of your work. You know, you're wanting people to. You're wanting to see people well. That's your incentive, right?
Yeah.
Over the financial benefits of keeping them unwell.
What's the incentive of a drug? What's the incentive of a drug dealer? Well, they want to offer you a good product. People usually get dodgy crap when they meet someone randomly. Like, people who know, like, I've not taken many drugs. I've taken some psychedelics, and I've probably taken ecstasy like a dozen times in my life. That might sound a lot to someone who's not taken it, but
that's 100%
doesn't sound like a lot to me.
We've got the whole spectrum here.
Maybe something a bit north of that. Maybe at most twice that. Probably less than that.
Dude, so, it's okay. You're already way more edgy than me.
Right, yeah, way more edgy than you.
And not as edgy as Sven. No, I've never had ecstasy.
So that's the thing. It's like, but I've been around circles where, West End of Glasgow, where it was 10 years ago, where it was normal, and it's like the people knew that guy or a couple of guys who could get you stuff. And I remember people saying, yeah, that dude's like, that dude, one of them in particular, yeah, he's really solid, if he gets a bad batch, he'll say, like, I've got these, if someone's like, have you got any pills, he'd go, yeah, I've got these ones, but they're not that great, or I've got these blue ones, they're really, really amazing. Like, I didn't hear him say it, but I heard through the grate. I was at a party once, one of my first experiences taking ecstasy or MDMA or whatever it was, and same guy, Antony, your jaw's going, you've got to drink some water. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, see, when that happens, like that means you're dehydrated. So, people at least get a reputation for being a go-to guy. So you don't want to kill your customers, and you want your customers to have a good experience so that they come back to you rather than someone else. I mean,
and of course, if these guys were criminals in the eyes of the state and society, then it's much harder to find them, much harder to contact them, much harder to deal with them, and much harder to trust them because they're underground. Whereas if it were a free market, we would have these upstanding dealers who take it seriously, who want it to be safe. They want their customers to have a good time and the safest time possible.
Yeah,
and they'll be honest, and they'll price their products according to their quality, and they won't sell products that they know to be dangerous or deadly. I mean, there's always risk and danger because everyone has a different response, but there's risk in everything, and that's what people forget. It's like there's statistically there's huge risk in getting in your car every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we mitigate these risks because we want the freedom to go to the shops. We want the freedom to go out into the world and move around quickly and travel and see places. So we take risks all the time. Why are drugs classed as a different kind of risk?
Well, they're so easy to demonize. And the thing about the Premier, she has to do this because there's parents out there whose kid... No, she has to say the things that she said and, say we're going to ban the festival and all that. She has to be seen. Like it's that thing, like heads must roll. If there's families out there who've lost, teenage kids to this, like something needs to be seen to be done. But
because otherwise we'll look at the state and we'll go, actually, you guys are causing this problem with your prohibition.
And the way they cause it is by demonizing it. And so as Antony mentioned earlier, like it drives it underground and people are too scared to ask questions about it. You can't, for everything else, we have our peers around us and we can ask people, is this safe? And you just don't have that in this industry for what it's worth. But what's really tragic is that the information is out there. I remember, again, nearly 20 years ago now, there was websites where it was like ratemypill.com. It was bluelight.n.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's still up, and people, they would take their pills, they would take a photo of it, they would rate it, and that's like the free market bringing a solution to it.
It just shows that people have the desire to experiment safely. They're not fucking idiots, right? Even in this atmosphere, the state of perverse, this oppressive busybody, like I'm being your brother's keeper, James, is like built in to the people's view of what society should be like, and people still create things like the dark web, rate my pill. People want good information before the internet. I mean, I've had people say, oh yeah, I've got this, I don't know the name of the chemicals, there's so many, but they're like, I'm going to go online and read up on it and find out. And this don't do drugs, is treating people like, they're idiots that need to be hypnotized. They should be saying, referring people to reliable information. I remember an ex-junkie coming to our school to tell, they got him in to give us a talk, and someone else one time came from the police and talked about all the drugs and how bad they were. And we don't take these people seriously. Kids are not fucking stupid. Bring them someone in that respects them and treats them like human beings and goes, so people like taking this drug for these reasons, and these are the effects that people are likely to have. These are the risks that they have. And, it would be so much better for them to say, if you're, we don't advise taking it. If you're going to take it, make sure you take it responsibly. If you can't tell your parents, then you should tell your parents. But if you can't tell your parents, blah, 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 blah. Go to a friend's house, find a reliable adult. So, because kids might actually listen to that, because it's not patronizing.
Yeah. And I guess we should talk about altered states in general and the way people seek them out, is that people can be a bit naive if they say that drugs are the only way in which human beings seek altered states. We seek altered states all the time with everything we do.
Coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Look at the size of the massive thermos of tea that I prepared for this show, because because Scotland is still part of Great Britain. I'm still British, and I need my caffeine fix in the morning. I need my cup of tea.
That's not caffeine, mate. You got to have coffee.
Well, apparently it's strong. Well, anyway, go on.
I look, it is, better living through chemistry, right? But I think things are changing, and like I said, it's been 20 years, when I first started all my, let's say, psychonautic experiencing, and I listened to so much Terence McKenna, who was the zealot for mushrooms, and now, like you mentioned, the psilocybin experiments, and they use it for smoking cessation, and there was a 25-year just total ban on all research on things like DMT and MDMA and psilocybin, and now it's coming back. You mentioned Gabor Mate before, and that book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, that is like the go-to book for anyone who's struggled with drug use. I would recommend that as well. But he's been involved in these ayahuasca experiments, and it's sort of very gratifying to me, who, like I said, 15 years ago, this was sort of my world. And it seems like very, very slowly the science is sort of catching up, and they're using these things in like proper psychological applications. And in those settings, in controlled settings, where it can be talked about as a legitimate thing and not, at some dingy warehouse or out at a bushduff. It's,
Definitely.
I think there's something in them, and we don't know the power of psychedelics yet, and I think we're still going to find that out in the future.
Yeah, and every psychedelic or every chemical that has a psychological potential for benefiting people, whether it's psilocybin treating depression or ayahuasca treating drug addiction, will not be suitable for everyone. I mean, I did have ayahuasca a bunch of times in my 20s because, frankly, I was at a dead end. I was really down and I was looking for something
to help. So did you do the full ceremonies, like the prolonged ayahuasca experience? Yeah, wow.
Yeah, my biggest one was I went for a week, and I think we did 5 or 6 days out of the week on a retreat. But you know what? It wasn't the medicine for me. They call it medicine. I had a couple of good experiences, but at the time, I was very anxiety prone, and most times I took it, I just got really paranoid and couldn't get out of my head. Some of the most terrifying experiences of my life. But I also experimented. I imbibed hallucinogenic cactus. I consistently found that to get me practical, like I would think on the cactus, I would think of things to say to people that I was having interpersonal conflicts with, or notice things that I didn't notice when I was sober. And then when I came down, I went and put what I learned on the cactus into practice, and hey presto, got much better results in my life. Reliably, I found it helpful. I took a ton of mushrooms when I was about 18, and I've barely taken them since then, and I loved it. I found was the attention to detail that I noticed things that I didn't notice. And then but what put me off is about a year or two later. The thing is with mushrooms, you build up a tolerance really quickly, but if you don't take them, the tolerance goes. So about a year after that, I was at some Halloween party and someone gave me some mushrooms, and I thought, oh yeah, that's fine for me, not realizing the last time I took them I'd built up a tolerance, and I had an absolutely terrifying experience. And so I'm just putting that out there to tell you that it ain't all, you're not necessarily going to have a good time on these things. Ayahuasca, you certainly cannot take recreationally, because there's nothing recreational about having to puke your guts up into a bucket. Do you know what I mean? So the thing is...
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, people need open access to information. We need experts so that we can figure out what might help people, because there's nothing is going to hold this back for two reasons. People hate suffering, and people are looking for ways to feel better. And if you get down enough, you will leave no stone unturned. I mean, when I first went to do ayahuasca, I felt like I was at a dead end. I needed to try something, which is what drove me there. And I'm not the only one who went there with that in mind. And I saw it help tons of people. Actually, I saw people come back to retreats a couple of years ago. They'd lost tons of weight, or they'd reformed their lives this way, that way, and the other. And it was the thing that gave them the kick in the ass.
Now, I'd like to share a little drug horror story, just to sort of put something on the flip side, because you're speaking of the bad experiences that can happen. And I guess this is, for me, the reason why, I've tried marijuana many times, but the reason why I've never taken party drugs like MDMA or ecstasy was that in my second year of university, I had a friend who was a really talented and absolutely hilarious guy, and he was a great keyboardist and producer, and we were doing some work together. And he was a loose guy, he was a real party animal, and he was known and openly talked about how much he took ecstasy on the weekends and that sort of thing. Well, for some reason, and I guess we could explore the reasons why kids do this. For some reason, he and some of his mates decided to try and cook up a batch of their own ecstasy, and they botched it badly, and he went into a coma for several months. He became epileptic, severely epileptic from this one dose of this bad batch that he made. Yeah. And the most tragic part of it was he was an aspiring and very talented musician, but when he came out of the coma, he had brain damage, and the epilepsy was triggered by music, so he could not listen to or play music without having seizures. Now they cared for him, and they worked on his medication for a very long time to try to find a balance, and he reached this point where he was able to listen to music again, and things were looking good. And our program convener at the university came to me and he said, look, Daniel's getting better and he'd like to come in for a day in the studio. I know you worked with him, I know you got along well. Would you he'll have a handler there too, but would you mind doing a session with him to ease him back into music and just keep your expectations really low? And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to get him in. And we booked in the day, and then like a few days before the day he was supposed to come back in, he had a massive seizure and died. Wow. And that was it.
Sad, James.
So for me, I just went, I'm never going to touch ecstasy, because I can't trust that what I'm putting in my stomach is going to not kill me like it killed Daniel.
Right.
So
and that's the point though. Like, what they had was not ecstasy. It wasn't pure MDMA. Who knows what they had?
Yeah,
you know?
But also, why would they be cooking up? Why would they be cooking up their own stuff?
Yeah.
If they could get an ecstasy as reliably as they could get a paracetamol.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And what it was, I suppose,
so
I would surmise that they cooked it up because they were finding it difficult, as regular users, they were finding it difficult to find stuff that was, strong enough for their tolerance, that was going to give them enough of a, maybe they just got some bad advice. But the point is that the information wasn't reliably available at that time.
Yeah.
And the good quality drugs weren't reliably available. There weren't measures in place to properly check what they're doing. Of course, there was just, reckless use as well is a factor here.
Yeah, I know. And that's when I think, like, see if you can't go a weekend without it, then you should be seeing a psychologist.
Yes,
definitely.
Yeah. He was because a troubled guy.
Definitely. I mean, why would you be doing it all the time? Like, unless you were troubled. I had a difficult, I had a difficult time this year, the beginning of this year. And a friend of mine had some, and I got some to take on my own for introspective purposes, to take as to get me a different perspective on the difficulties I was trying. I just took it in my house and journaled. I stayed up the night, figured out what I was going to, that I think that's kind of like a responsible use of a substance. It's like, I'm going through a hard time, I'm trying to figure out my own. Maybe I'll get a different angle. But if you're doing this like all the time, that means your native state, the way that you are in day-to-day life, is not comfortable for you. And I don't think that our society is really having sympathy for this. I would never hear someone on the news say, well, if people are smoking marijuana every day, or if people are taking ecstasy every weekend, clearly their native feeling. I mean, we used to know a guy, he was quite old, significantly older than us, when I first started going out clubbing, that took speed very, very regular. And it's like, yeah, to be honest, when you get older, you take it to like make. And I love that when people say you to normalize what they're doing. He doesn't say, well, I take it. He didn't say, well, I take it to still have the same energy that I had when I was younger. He generalized that. That kind of thing. It's like, people don't. That's the thing. It's quite sad, because it shows you if you take Gabor Mate's hypothesis seriously, that people are taking substances to self-medicate for low states and to not face their emotions, to not face the effects of their trauma. then it's quite sad taking an Ian at a party and go, oh, I've got so many ideas, like this week I can do this, and I'll finish that song and I'll write that, and it's like, yeah, I can do it, man, I can fucking do it because I feel happy. And I've had that experience, and then a couple of days later you come down and you've not got the energy, and you think, is that what was robbed from me? See, if I had had a really amazing childhood, is that what I'd be like? Would I be that full of energy and and without limitations that I just... so yeah, if you want more energy, take up yoga. That's number one recommendation. It's not a fast-term solution like taking an ecstasy tablet, but over time it definitely increases the amount of energy you have.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sad thing. Like, Timothy Leary talked about set and setting, right? And now all these drugs are being taken, like I said, in these dingy warehouses or nightclubs. Like, that's not the place for these things. They're not supposed to be like party drugs. It's like you said, it's for deep inner journeying. And I was really fortunate when I started partying that I met some people that were, quite straight edge, and they were just there for the music sort of thing. So I had a good counterexample. But even then, I still did a lot of drugs. But I had that idea that this should be something that's treated with respect. And I always wanted to bring something back into my real life. Definitely. So it wasn't just, something for the weekend. But yeah, so...
Yeah, and I mean, that's just not the case for most people that I've encountered in my life, particularly in my uni days, who are doing ecstasy and, it's a weekend party drug escapism pleasure only. And I think, Sven, you have a very healthy attitude about it in that regard. And that's something that we need to be promoting, is that, like, as you said at the start, the war on drugs has been one of the most epic failures of any government policy we've ever seen. It's worse than ever. People are dying, and the only things that have ever pushed it in the right direction have been free market solutions. And so we need to be promoting a free market approach to drugs that also includes, encouragement and almost a kind of chaplaincy, of the spiritual journeying that can be part of particularly psychedelics for people. That it's not merely escapism. It can be, and a lot of people choose it to be, but it ought to be. These chemicals, a lot of the psychedelics in particular, just occur in nature. They're just right there, ready to go. There's no laboratory diddling needed. They grow in the ground. This is part of God's design of the earth, and I believe that they have a function for human beings, and that's why we react to them in the ways that we do, and that's why so many amazing experiences happen for people, and they learn so much about themselves. They learn so much about the spiritual realm. They have, as you said, Antony, they have people like you have insights into your own, specific problems in relationships. That the answers that you can't find because you're mired with doubts or whatever about conflicts. Suddenly, these answers can spring up from the spiritual fountainhead. During a psychedelic experience, there is real value to be found in them if they're dealt with safely, and if people are guided by experienced psychonauts who have the right attitude and don't treat them flippantly.
Right on.
So that's my recommendation.
Have we smashed this topic yet?
Yeah. Oh man, we've smashed it. We've spent an hour on it. So. Yeah, like let's talk to people more about this, particularly around the issue of DEFCON 1, because we've got this state intervention coming in, pointing the finger at all the wrong people, punishing all the wrong people, and as you said, Sven, the state premier, she has to say this because she's got a virtue signal to distract people, to seize people's fear and distract them from the fact that it is actually the state that is causing these deaths. It is prohibition. It is the current state of play in the war on drugs that is making it possible for people to die on such a large scale like this. So let's not let this one stand. Now, let's get back to universal basic income. We didn't delve too far there. Okay. I interviewed one of our senators just the other day, David Leyonhjelm, and I mentioned it to him. We were talking about welfarism and the problems that as libertarians, we can see with the welfare state. And I said to him, what about universal basic income as a potentially viable alternative? And his answer was interesting because he started off with, well, it's a bit like communism. It's good in theory, but in practice it doesn't work. Now, I take issue with the good in theory part.
The good in theory, yeah.
But what were some of your findings that you've shared in your book? Were there any, in your investigation of the arguments for and against universal basic income, what was the most surprising thing that you discovered?
The best argument in favour of universal basic income is that it would get rid of the bureaucracy and a whole ton of welfare programs, and theoretically, and also in an ideal world, you wouldn't have to have the state subsidizing people's dental care and healthcare and this and that and the other, because people could shop around. I mean, from a free market perspective, you could say, well, that's now affordable to people now because they've got universal basic income. So if we let them shop around, then they'll get the best service at the best price instead of the government paying for it, which degrades the value of everything. Well, that's nice in theory, but the truth is that most people don't actually believe that the free market produces... People don't think, if the government stops subsidising dental care, as they do here in the UK, and giving people free, the price will go down and down over time. So that's probably, you can chuck that idea in the waste paper basket if you're a pro-UBI libertarian. The other thing is, realistically, I don't think that's how it's going to pan out, because what happens is, people say, first, okay, you get even if you manage to abolish all the welfare programs and replace it with a UBI, then people would say, well, I live in an expensive area, I should get a higher UBI. I'm a single mother, I should get a higher UBI. And then you're back to the same bureaucratic mess. What was my most surprising finding? That's a really hard question to answer, because I wasn't surprised by much. I just, I guess I come back to the idea that it amazes me the extent to which people think, here's a problem. Whenever there's a problem, the gut reaction of people is to go, let's have more government to solve that, right? See, imagine if you were like a big fatty and you went to the doctor and he said, like, here, take these diet pills and take these pills to deal with the side effects of those, and if you feel queasy, come back and I'll give you something else. And you went, well, what about my diet? What about my addictive eating behavior and stuff like that? It's like, oh, forget about that, right? Why don't you get people choosing healthy lifestyles first, and then if that doesn't work, then maybe give them some pharmaceuticals? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the book aims to go, well, right, let's look at poverty. Like, why do we have poverty? Like, there's people who'll come on, or libertarians, they'll say, like the co-host of the Scottish Liberty podcast, Tam, right? He grew up in Central Africa, and he was like, do you know what? I'd love someone to go to a village in Africa and tell them about all the fucking poverty in Scotland, right? So poverty is obviously some... Compared to what? But let's say, from a average standpoint, right? I'm living right now in a deprived area of Glasgow. The rent's nice and cheap. So, but like, why is it, when you look at the fact that between 1800 and 1965, the average number of hours worked went from 1870, that's when we have figures, the average number of hours worked went from maybe 62 to 42, or I've got exact figures in the book, right? Now, since then, we've got these computers, we've got laptops, we've got we already had these labor-saving devices. The the March, so much stuff is cheap. I got a little notebook computer that's got it's got a calculator, 2 cameras. Any of the devices on my little notebook, which I bought for 100 quid, maybe 120 quid, would have cost, any of the devices on it would have cost that 10 years ago. When we can get all of our music's free on YouTube, sorry James, but you're gonna see a drop in your album sales. You get when we've got so much.
I don't think it can drop any further, bro.
I give out my books for free. Why? Because I know I don't want to make money from the books, right? I'm trying to raise my profile here. Download the book and send it to your lefty friends.
Where do they download it? Tell us now, quickly.
Yeah, beyourselfandloveit.com/UBI. So my question is, given the advance in technology over the last 50 years, why has the average number of hours worked not dropped by the same amount again? You'd think that it would have. So I try and answer that question and by going into a whole bunch of ways that the state makes life more expensive. And the way that I tie that into the UBI is that I say, look at the figures. Look how much a UBI would cost. Even if we were just giving people the minimum amount, which I think in this country would be like $8,000 or $7,000. I mean, that would be enough to live. It still costs more than total government spending right now, significantly more. So you cannot afford a UBI right now. But if you do want a UBI, then here's a bunch of libertarian policies that will lower the cost of living to the point, like supposing your rent or mortgage cost a quarter of what it costs now, then it would be cheaper to provide people with a UBI because the cost of living would have gone down. So that's how I tie it in. I say, well, I'm not for the UBI, but if you are for the UBI, you kind of need these policies. So I really need. If you're interested and if your interest has been piqued, I really need all hands on deck for this book. Like, download it and email it to all your lefty friends and the people that you know who are for UBI, because this is speaking directly to the values of those people. It's about poverty reduction. It's about increasing the standard of living for everyone, starting with people at the bottom. And I think that it's, what I was talking about before when I said most of the stuff I've done in my life professionally has been because I thought it was necessary. I think this book is a necessary addition to libertarianism, basically, to free market economics, which is, let's speak to the left on their own terms, on their values. They talk about poverty reduction. So here's a bunch of libertarian policies that would reduce poverty and raise everyone's standards of living. And I think it will equip you to debate, and also, if your friends are open and minded enough, send them a copy. I deal with the question of automation. I deal with all sorts of objections to... I deal with all sorts of arguments in favour of UBI and objections to the arguments against. And I don't know, depending on your knowledge at home of economic study, I feel like you would come away from reading this book, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, feeling like you actually know about quite a lot about economics, and you can apply what you've learned from the book to other issues. I guess I could say I'm proud of it. Yes, it's a good piece of writing. It probably only take 2 hours to read, maybe
Excellent.
3.
Excellent. So I'll splash up a picture of your website here, and if you tell our audience the website again nice and slowly so they can jump across there and grab a copy. It is free, which is most generous of you indeed. And here's the
you can buy it on Amazon Kindle, but if you want a Kindle edition, but I think the PDFs will be better. if you wanted to buy it just to give me money, you'd be better off PayPaling me £3 rather than buying the book, because then I'll get the whole whack. So,
excellent. Now, what's with the Garden of Eden on the cover? What inspired your choice for that?
Bring it up.
Yeah, I've got it up.
Oh, so people at home can see it.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, yeah, I thought this would be a perfect, like, I was thinking of a cover, and there's a metaphor in my book where I say that redistributing wealth is like taking water from the deep end of the swimming pool and pouring it into the shallow end, but spilling some of it along the way. Because what happens, like, you tax the rich people, you give the money to the poor people, they go out to the shops and spend it, goes back to the rich people again, except for you've had to pay the government bureaucrats who distributed it. And my brother said he liked that, and I should do something with that for the cover. But as I was thinking about what to put on the cover, the idea of the Garden of Eden came to me, and I love it because it's got kind of a double meaning, I think. On one hand, you've got the idea of the like in the Garden of Eden, Adam didn't work because he had to. He worked because he wanted to. It was only after the fall that he that God told him that he had to work. So all of their needs were provided for in the Garden of Eden. So it's got that emphasis of that. It's got that on one level, the idea of everything's provided for you in the Garden of Eden. Your needs are met. You can work because you want to, not because you have to. And on the other hand, it's obviously got the idea of the forbidden fruit. Oh, is this a good idea? We can give you this. Oh, I'm going to give you free stuff.
Yeah.
And Adam on the cover is going, I'm not sure if I should eat this or not. And I saw there was another picture of the Garden of Eden that I liked more. It was more beautiful. But what settled me on this one was the look on his face of, I don't know if I should take this or not. And the idea is, I've got some theories in the book of what might happen if we didn't institute an UBI. And my honest opinion is, I think it would just make the money worthless. Because what makes money worthwhile is people have to sacrifice for it. If you just get the money, then people start trading in Bitcoin or dollars or euros instead, because they're like, that's one thing that could happen. The other thing that could happen is the government could weaponize it and say, well, if you don't do this, then we're going to cut your UBI, or, you know...
Well, it wouldn't be UBI anymore, though, if there's any threat to it being taken away, right?
Yeah, but it starts out as a UBI, and then the government uses it to sanction people who do things that they don't want them to do. I can't think of anything more scary than everyone being dependent on the government for their income. Do you know what I mean? I say, you know, it sounds like a dystopian novel, but I'm all too fearful that that's what actually would happen. And there's a couple of other things that could go wrong as well. I mean... Obviously, the most obvious one from the conservative point of view, the classic argument against welfare is, well, you're incentivizing people not to work while punishing people who do work. And I do think that's part of it. But I think people would still do meaningful work, even if most people would, even if they were provided with a UBI. But it might not be the most important work, because it's not work that other people are paying. When you work a job, it's because you're providing value to someone else. So that's a thing to consider. And fundamentally, the thing that I think's worst about it is it's non-discriminatory. So you might not be helping people. I mean, if you give someone who's addicted to video games a universal basic income, you might be making them worse, not better. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Although, video games is a good example of the new economy, because they're one of the troubles with the whole state model is to say, you know, other people love to define what meaningful work is, you know, and they go, well, that's not meaningful to me. Video games, what a waste of time. I shouldn't be paying tax so that you can get a UBI to sit on your ass all day and play video games. But there's a whole new economy within the video game sector alone of people who are receiving value from other gamers by watching how they play the game, by learning, you know, hacks and I mean, Sven knows a lot more about this than I do, but it blew me away when you showed me that video, Sven, of of this guy who's just like an expert sharpshooter at this first-person shooter game. And how much money did he make in that one live stream from voluntary donations?
I think it was like $40,000 US in about 40 minutes.
$40,000 US in donations from people who just
I wish that I could make that. Guys,
that's
audience, fill your fucking wallets out, man.
Yeah.
James and Sven are pouring their life's blood into the Rational Rise. This computer gamer can get 40 grand, and you won't even part with $10 for that beautiful face.
Well, I'm gonna jump on that opportunity for a segue to our support page. You can support us in a number of ways if you enjoy what we're doing at the Rational Rise. We have a Patreon account for now. We haven't said anything too controversial, so it's still there. It's www.patreon.com/rationalrise. We have a merch store, therationalrise.com/merch, where you can get some of our t-shirts and designs that we've made, including this lovely I Am Dankula shirt and this The Gender Gauge Rap is Real shirt. And also I've got my novel, The Ghost of Emily, which is about to be relaunched, and I've got another novel coming out next year, so you can hop over to theghostsofmen.com to support. And Sven, I'm trusting that while I've been on this other scene, you've been grabbing some of them stickers you got there. And
I do.
Let's have a look. Sven also has his own project that we love to promote and plug. Tell us about it.
Truth Tags are philosophical bumper stickers. You can get them at truthtags.com.au and accepting cryptocurrency there. And also we'll be at Liberty Fest next week, and I'll have them all there as well.
Excellent. So yes, those are the ways that you can jump on the websites now to support us. And of course, Antony is a sucker for punishment, so he's giving his book away for free. And you can hop over to beyourselfandloveit.com/UBI. But as we're saying, we're part of the new economy here. Like there's this intellectual dark web emerging as one of the many names for it. But this world where people want to sit down and listen to a long form conversation like this. They want to sit and listen to us blabbing on for 2 or 3 hours about intellectual, economic, social policies and all kinds of wacky ideas. This is a whole new economy, and it is meaningful work, right? But it doesn't feed people, and that's the thing.
Right.
There's the primary economy that is like we need to produce food and shelter. These basic sort of physiological needs of humanity need to be covered, and that is the essentials. And we need to do what we can to protect those industries and that sector of the economy. What we're doing is sort of infotainment. It's expendable in a crisis. This economy will be the first to be sacrificed because it gives meaning to people's lives. It helps people understand the world around them and helps us understand ourselves in doing it. But it doesn't feed our babies.
Yeah, that's a luxury of civilization. People wonder why the older generation is not as into this stuff, and it's like, well, they're kind of closer. They're like 60 years closer to the... People don't realize how much choice we have compared to all of history. I mean, it wasn't so long ago. You lived where your parents lived. You married who your parents married. So it said you'd marry. most of your labor belonged to your feudal lord. Like slavery was normal, so you might have been a slave. So it's not just the freedom to vote. I mean, if you listen to Hans Hermann Hoppe, that might have been actually a generate step in creating universal suffrage. But in our day-to-day lives, we are confronted with a whole bunch of decisions that we didn't need to make. Where to live, who to marry, what job to do. And it's interesting because I was having this conversation a couple of nights ago, and I was like, we are one of the first generations. Throughout all of history, people have been suffering their bondage. Handcuffs and stuff, jokes aside, whether it was their bondage to their feudal lord or whatever, the need to farm for 57 hours a week or more, like whatever, their lack of freedom, their lack of financial capability to choose what to do with their leisure time. There's another thing. We've got so much leisure time. We've got wealth. We've got so much choice over what to do with our leisure time, so we don't know if we're wasting it or not. We're maybe one of the first generations that suffers more for our freedom than our bondage. Isn't that interesting? And I think as a species, there's some psychonomics for you.
Yes.
Psychonomics doesn't actually mean a mixture between psychology and economics, but I'm deciding that for the purposes, whenever I say it is, right?
You're co-opting the term, and if anyone challenges you on it, that's hate speech.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm co-opting the term psychonomics. It's an interesting fact, and people look around the world and see all the shit that's going down right now and think, what, is humanity like fucked up? Is there something wrong with us? Well, as Jordan Peterson said, probably, because there's lots of things wrong with most people, so there probably is something wrong with you. But more to the point, it's like we've not actually had this freedom before, and we don't know what the fuck to do with it. And as a species, we're trying to figure it out.
Idle hands, as they say, right?
Yeah, and we just haven't had the time to figure out how to create, like, the divorce rate, and and we can talk about how the state plays into that by paying women to divorce men in a way. But I just think, people have higher expectations in relationships now. They expect to be able to connect in all levels and not to argue too much and blah blah, and all these things that were just normal before because you didn't get to choose who you married, so you were just locked in and you made the best of what you could. And now we go, oh, we're failing. Yeah, we're failing because we've not actually had the freedom to succeed for long enough to figure out how to do it correctly.
And we're seeing a generation of people who are trying to make it illegal to offend one another.
Right.
We need to toughen the fuck up a bit. We've got, if that's the result of these idle hands, and maybe this ties into the drug conversation too. The prevalence of recreational drug use is a byproduct of having too much freedom and too much security and too much spare time.
Existential dread sets in.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like, this is going to sound weird, but there's nothing like a world war for people to pull their bootstraps up and start, like looking at their society around them and going, yeah, I'm going to fight for this and fight for something bigger than me. I don't advocate war at all, but it's these crisis situations where people actually rise to the occasion and stop being so introspective and selfish, I think.
Yeah, well, if you haven't faced, like, say, the real hardship of going to what doesn't even need to be that, working in a factory, doing something that's really grueling.
Sven works in a factory.
And you feel shit, right? You feel like crap. And you can't figure out why you feel like crap. It must be because someone offended you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're looking to the environment to say, well, why do I feel so bad? Oh, it must be capitalism. It must be capitalism. That must be the reason why it's so bad. Oh, you don't have any real problems in your life, but you feel anxious. So you need to find something out in the world that's making you anxious, or you feel depressed even though all your material needs are met. So you think it must be something to do with the world, and then you rail against free speech because, minorities, and that even though that minorities in Western society have a better standard of living, not only than most people in the world, but most people who have ever lived ever, right? So it's like, they're not going out talking about the poor standards of living under dictatorial African regimes where, that oppress their people. Where I'm talking about the worst places in the world. Some of them are in Africa. There's what's going on in Yemen. They're talking about African, Americans and who, if they were a nation, would be one of the richest nations in the world. Like, they're not the most disadvantaged people in the world. So it seems to me that it's more of a psychological phenomenon. The fact that it defies rationality would suggest that it's more of a psychological phenomenon than a rational one.
Yeah, it's like there's so many parallel, massive, like globe-spanning social experiments going on. Just like things that come to mind are like the pill for women. It's totally changed the relationship of sex between men and women. The rise of like just social media technology, and it's like that boiling frogs thing. Like we're all here, and it's just happening to us. And there's been so much change in the last even like 20 years, but we're in the midst of it. So people kind of don't realize in our day-to-day lives, we don't realize how weird the world is, and here we are, we're just fucking monkeys, and we're sitting here, you're on the other side of the world, and we're having this conversation, and at the end of the day, we
could do this 10 years ago.
No, and we have no idea like what to make of it, and like you said, we're just fumbling our way through it, trying to work out how to do it. So you guys brought up so much stuff, I don't even know where to start to respond or like what to pick up on. But the thing about to bring it back to the UBI thing, because the economics thing, it always comes out of this scarcity idea, which all of economics is based on scarcity. That's resources are limited and human desires are infinite. And one of the arguments that I understand from UBI is that we're moving to a time of abundance and there's not going to be scarcity anymore. And that's true. Like it used to be that, maybe 2/3 of, or even 90% of people were engaged in agriculture just to survive. And now it's probably less than 1% of people that actually have to do that to feed everyone. Like not that everyone's being fed, but
there was a time when it was almost everyone.
And automation will only increase over time.
But I think there will still be jobs because, like you said, now that the scarcity is being pushed into other areas, and like those of us who are in this new economy, and my partner is as well, like she just makes Facebook content and people pay her voluntarily, she puts everything out for free. And that is the new model, in this time of abundance, that you've got to put everything out for free because you're just competing against, what is it on YouTube? It's like something like, I don't know how many million minutes of YouTube footage is uploaded like every month or so, but that's the free market in action. Like, anyone watching this now, I'm very grateful if you're watching this now, because you have every single video that ever was.
Dude, you've got PewDiePie to be watching. What are you doing watching us? No, please stay.
That speaks
You're
to the
much
hunger.
more of a cutie pie than PewDiePie, James.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Sven, what were you saying?
Well, it just speaks to the hunger that people have for these sorts of conversations. So I think there is and that comes back, if you want to tie it into the drug thing, like people are searching for meaning in their lives, and that's what they come to this sort of thing for. They want those long form conversations that actually hit the deep issues, and not just like the superficial bullshit on mainstream media. So
that's right. And I think probably as we go to a post-scarcity society, most work will be like mentoring and teaching people specific skills. The thing is, it's such nonsense because we're constantly told classroom sizes are too big, the waiting list there's not enough nurses, the waiting list for healthcare is so long. So how are you telling me that we're running out of jobs at the same time as you're telling me that, there's so many old people who are dejected in their homes and they have no social contact? How can you tell me that at the same time as telling me there's no jobs? So most of the jobs will be something that involves a human touch and engagement. And I'm optimistic about the future. Automation presents challenges, but I think the main fallacy that people have regarding automation is they believe that it accelerates wealth to the top. Well, it might actually might actually make people very wealthy, but what they don't understand is that the benefits of automation, they think that some people will have a few £1 trillion and everyone else will be poor. Well, who's going to make them trillionaires if they can't afford to buy their goddamn products? Do you know what I mean? It's like, one of the things that people don't realize is that the benefits of automation are distributed by the market. Because if I create a machine that does the job of one of my employees, my costs of production go down. And if I don't reduce the price of the product, someone else will use that innovation to... So the benefits of automation are redistributed because they lower the cost of production and therefore lower the cost of products. That's one way. The other way is the reason why wages are so much higher than they were, say, 200 years ago is because automation allows one person to do the work that 40 people or 200 people used to be required to do. So their labor is more valuable because they're working for machines. Therefore, their employer has to pay them more. Otherwise, someone else will pay them more. There is a labor market. So people think that the benefits of automation will just go to the people who own the machines, but it's not. And what it's distributed throughout society by the market, and the freer the market, the quicker it'll be distributed. But that will, over time, rather than put people out of jobs, as all the products and services in the economy become cheaper, the number of hours that people need to work to make a living should go down as well. I say should go down because obviously the government can intervene to fuck it up, and they probably will. But how successful they will be. If your weekly shop costs half what it does now, if it used to be $100 and now it's only $50, well, you don't need to work to earn the extra $50. So you need to work less to be able to afford the same amount of stuff. That's how automation will gradually enrich the lives of everyone. And in a way, it's basically serving as a UBI by making things cheaper.
Mm. We're also seeing a whole new sector emerging in the sharing economy, with things like Airbnb and Uber being the sort of most prevalent and successful examples. But I remember from years ago when I was living in Sydney, fairly close to the CBD, I forget the name of the company, but there was just a car share company, and I'm sure there are lots and lots of them now around the world, the Western world, where people don't own a car anymore because you can just be a member of a group who collectively have access, and you just book in the times you want it, and you just, you've got your key and you go and get it, and following from the model that was probably pioneered by eBay of, having a social media, rating system to say, well, here's a bad customer, so let's we can kick them off if they wreck the car and they'll have to pay whatever fees. But if people abuse their times, then they'll get bad ratings. That there are all these sectors emerging where it's going to the things that we think are our needs now will not necessarily be our needs in 50 years as the economy changes.
Yeah, and apps are so good for that. I mean, when they develop the self-driving car, a lot of people might not need to have a car because you just put all the data of who wants to go where, and you can pick people up along the way and choose the most efficient use of that seated vehicle to take. It might be a minibus. The computer will figure out how to get that vehicle to drive the least distance while dropping everyone off at their destinations. And it's interesting that you mentioned things like Uber and Lyft Share, and I think of TripAdvisor as an example because there's so much stuff that's come out in the last few years that the technology's been there to do it for 10 years, right? So see, even if they put a complete ban on inventing anything new for 10 years, because like the pace of change, we would just be able to use the technology that we've got. Would still speed, like something like TripAdvisor, they could have invented that in 2000. The internet was there, the technology was there, but someone only did it later on. Someone only thought of it later on. Like it's amazing the rate of the progress. It boggles boggles the mind.
So let's talk briefly, Sven, about one of the newest and hottest technologies on the scene, which is blockchain. Like, what do you see as the potential there? Is there anything beyond Bitcoin in that technology?
Well, I would correct you first up and say it's Bitcoin, not blockchain. That's the technology. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, what Antony was saying about...
Can you clarify that distinction?
Well, yeah, blockchain's is just part of the technology in Bitcoin, and it's a hype word, and lots of other, altcoins, copycat currencies have tried to, use blockchain and claim that they are bringing something new. But what I try and tell people is that Bitcoin is bringing an economic revolution. It's not a technological one. And it ties into what Antony was saying about the UBI, and that if everyone just has their income for free, like where's that money coming from? Most likely the government's just printing it out of thin air because fiat currency is an unsound money. They can just print it at will. And the revolution, the economic revolution that Bitcoin is that it's hard money, and you can't inflate the supply. And that comes back to what capitalism, what it actually gives to us, and that's a way of organizing society. And the price mechanism is the way we know, how much value something has. And any kind of central planning, it can never solve this price calculation problem. So yeah, like that's where my real reverence for money comes from, because through having this sort of abstract idea of money, we can value everything else in it and organize society that way.
So what about universal basic Bitcoin?
Well, I mean,
it's an interesting thing, because there is a company online that's created a cryptocurrency and offers, I actually remark on it in the book, I say they offer a universal basic income in their cryptocurrency,
and they're worthless shitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what I mean? No one wants to trade with it. Why? Because there's no labor behind it. No one's sacrificed to make that. The point of money should be, here is a certificate that says I have served my fellow man. They've exchanged something so that with me, so it's a token of value. It's a store, and I can take that to someone else, and and say, well, I served my fellow man, so you can serve me, in exchange for this, so that you can get someone else to serve you, so I can get someone else to serve me. It's a chain.
And if this is a new idea to anyone watching, people who aren't sort of economically literate, I would strongly suggest checking this book out. Especially, there's a fantastic speech somewhere near the middle of the book by D'Anconia about, is money the root of all evil? Sven wrote an article on our website about it some time ago, that question, but he gives a fantastic speech about it being exactly as you just described, a certificate of goodwill between men.
Right.
What were you going to say, Sven?
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to mention what Antony was just saying reminded me of like the way I like to characterize money now. It's like crystallized human life force and energy, It's just a little token that you put your energy and your time into, and you can trade it out into the future. You can put your life force into something that you can spend in the future. So money is I really believe that money is like the most important technology that humans ever invented. And I truly believe that like Bitcoin is it's going to be the greatest revolution that's ever happened since that time. So it's exciting times.
Bye.
Right.
Not yet. Getting there.
Well, Sven, we had a couple of other things on our agenda. There's been, speaking of how absolutely insane the world has become, not just that, we three monkeys can sit in opposite corners of the world and chat to each other through a screen and have voyeurs at home watching and enjoying our rantings. Now we've got Count Dankula and Sargon of Akkad visiting the EU Parliament to make speeches. I mean, what the hell is going on?
They started out like us, just speaking to their YouTube audience.
I mean, Sargon put up a funny video where he was just sitting on his couch at the hotel afterwards, and he's just like, "What the fuck is going on?" I just wanted to make a joke about a pug, my girlfriend's pug. I'm not supposed to be at the EU Parliament. So hilarious, like that these people are becoming, political leaders and important figures in a social revolution.
Well, in this time of social media, like they are thought leaders, they are influencers, as they say, and they've got a huge reach, So that's how the world is going now, and it's really weird. Like Sargon said, like, I just wanted to play computer games, and then Gamergate happened, and he got drawn into all this feminist bullshit. And this was an effect of the free market as well, because the feedback he got from people voluntarily watching his videos is like they wanted more of that stuff. And he just kept doing what he was doing in response to the feedback from people. This is how voluntarism is supposed to work. And now he has built up this platform, and he's creating value. Like what he produces, the content he produces is very valuable for people, and people trust him now. And it's really weird because now the same thing is sort of happening to us as well. Like James, you just interviewed a sitting Australian senator, Senator Lanehelm, and I shared that post on Facebook, and today I had a little thing come up, Senator Lanehelm has liked your post to me. And I'm like, who the fuck am I that an Australian senator is liking one of my posts on Facebook? But
who the fuck are you, Sven?
Yeah. Well, you're part of the movement who are going to get people like him re-elected and help other people like Senator Lanehelm emerge. And as I mentioned, as I asked him, we're seeing this two-party system we've had in Australia for a long time that's very similar to what you have in Britain and very similar to what exists in America. But in Australia, we're seeing, especially in the Senate, independent voices and small parties and all of these sort of fringe elements coming in and actually having some legislative power in changing the face of Australia. It's an amazing time because the systems as we know them are breaking down. Money is going to die, as we know, like fiat currency, I should say, which is not actually money, is on its death throes. And then technologies like Bitcoin are emerging to change it. This is a radical revolutionary time. And now independent voices and libertarians are starting to emerge into positions of power. We're going to see the UKIP party. We might even see Sargon and Dankula in public office at some point,
Yeah, it could happen.
Tommy Robinson, could be a prime minister one day. You just never know because of the way the landscape is changing so rapidly.
For sure. It's a very interesting time to be alive. We're lucky to bear witness to the birth of the new world, man. We're the only generation that has one foot in the old one and one foot in the new one. I mean, you guys probably like me remember before internet,
Yep.
It's like it was people fully grown adults were born after the internet was invented.
Yeah, I was just explaining it to my 7-year-old son yesterday. I was just like, the things that we enjoy together today, watching an episode of Lego Ninjago on Netflix. This is new stuff. This is really, really new. And I told him about, the sort of plays that used to be put on in ancient Greece. And I said that was the way that people shared stories and disseminated information and changed the world. And now you just you don't need to go to the cinema anymore. You get your movies straight to Netflix. And it's a better experience at home.
And I'm even hopeful that the internet, to a degree, has made people somewhat more rational, because in the old days, if you had a debate in the pub, you couldn't fact check anything, whereas now we go, okay, if we have a disagreement, we go, well, let's Google it and find out who's right. People...
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. As people grow up with the phenomenon of being able to fact check things, it's harder to be prejudiced and parochial, at least without everyone making fun of you for it, because you're not accepting a blatant fact.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying?
Well, I was just about to say I'm looking forward to the time that I think is imminent when the common parlance changes of let me Google that, and we ditch the Google. And we, come up with a more universal and generic term because Google is beginning to prove itself to be not as helpful as it used to be in the quest for truth.
Well, that gives me an excuse to share another one of the truth tags. You might like this one, Antony. Is that
and and it is good, and I do believe that, and I get infuriated at people because people, especially on the left, have views. I meet people who have got views that I think belonged 15 years ago under Bush, and I'm like, you know that the world has moved on in the last 15 years. Like, what the hell? Like, just how come you're still parroting the same slogans that people were saying 15 years ago? You've got access to so much more information. And I did see that. What was there a move in America sometimes when people were having debates, or that the news channels actually fact check their claims as they made them? Now that might be pioneering technology. I mean, if that takes off, okay, of course the network could lie and in place of their favorite candidate and fact check incorrectly, someone fact checks the fact checkers, is massive humiliation for a mainstream news channel if the paper started saying, oh, they were biased, they said that this was a fact when it wasn't a fact because it's their preferred candidate. Yeah. I've I've made capital upon these slogans that are going around today. I talk about the era of fake news a little bit in my book. And by the way, guys at home, if you're not already, get the book. BeYourselfAndLoveIt.com/UBI. It will enrich you. Sorry.
Indeed. Well, yeah. I mean, fake news is one of even just the hashtag of fake news is sort of like a technology, right? That's emerged in the last 2 years since Trump has come into power, and it begins as a joke. All of these things begin as a meme or a joke, but someone like Trump, he's just hammering that line, and he has almost single-handedly brought the trust in mainstream media down to all-time lows. So there's another revolutionary element in our time, is that our information sources are now no longer trustworthy, and we're skeptical of everything. We're even skeptical of our favorite sources, and we do begin, I think the wise do begin to fact check more, and so it becomes less tolerable, James, when you run into people who... Sorry?
You say that, but why should I believe you?
Nice. Well, this is exactly,
because ignorance is a choice.
Right. Well, it's a great bumper sticker, right? But I mean, I always think of the other side, and is it the age of information or is it the age of misinformation, right? And propaganda, and it's so easy for them to propagandize us now, and it's kind of, I don't know if you want to call it ironic, but Alex Jones nailed it. I don't know when he started InfoWars, but it's information wars, and it's meme wars, right? And like that idea of fake news, that's a meme. So yeah.
It might get to the point where there's so much information that no one can tell truth from falsehood at all. Who fucking knows? Next thing, they're going to put a neurochip at the bottom of your neck and you'll be plugged into the fucking whatever. But
I think it's a good thing, though, that people are in constant doubt. I think it's a good thing that we've reached the most skeptical time where we don't trust any single source. And so we look for verification, and we look for people who have established trust and who have a great track record, and we trust our instincts a lot more on a person-to-person level. I think this is a good development.
It is, but on the political level, it's annoying that everyone needs to be an expert on this stuff, because you shouldn't have to know anything about it to function in the world. It's just the fact that everyone gets a vote, and no matter how incompetent or whatever they are, as I say, one of these days I'm going to get into trouble for saying one of these things. But I love, you mentioned memes, and I love meme culture. It's so clever. Like, to be able to convey a whole bunch of information in a quick image that you can look at in a second is really, it's a technology, it's an art form.
Now under attack by the EU, I believe.
Yeah, like
13,
my right, and my handle on Instagram is rolled up sleeves fam. And it just started as a silly stand-in, one because I like rolling up my sleeves, and the other one is I just like the meme of fam, like what up fam, just the word fam, because it's so silly, like it's like half of the word family or not even, and you just refer to anyone as fam, and it sounds so silly when you say it out loud.
It's quite pretentious.
But yet somehow on the internet it's perfectly acceptable. So I thought I used it as a silly way, and I just put it in as a stand-in while I thought of an Instagram account name, but then it just stuck, and like people still say things about rolled up sleeves, or like I can put up my predictive text thinking that I'm going to type in like I'm using it satirically, right? I'm not the kind of person who'd say that.
I think most people are these days. These things become a joke in themselves.
I just screenshot it and put that up on my Instagram. The fact that my predictive text thinks I'm going to say fam next, and people laugh and they like that because they're in on the joke.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's so many layers.
Yeah, memes
in the meme culture now. And it moves so quickly now. You can kind of see it. Like it's almost like it comes in waves. Like just in the last couple of weeks, like what did we have? The Colin Kaepernick, the Nike ad, and
man, that went off like a rocket.
We had a week, and it's still happening now of solid Colin Kaepernick memes. And then the next thing. I
hated it as well.
Well, but you don't have to wait too long because within 5 or 10 days, like the next thing comes along, and I mean it's just amazing.
Yeah, and I saw a great meme today, and I'll try to, after I stop talking about it in this moment, I'll try to bring it up to share. But it was illustrating that with Article 13, that's preventing people from using stock images for their memes, making legal sanctions against people for using stock images. There may be a surge in memes that are hand drawn in MS Paint, so that could be the next wave of memes.
Like it. Probably not for me because I'm terrible at drawing.
Now, in the world of ridiculous again, I just am seeing constantly in my news feed over and over in the last week or so the based Dalai Lama.
Oh yeah, good one. Oh my God,
you mean the alt-right fascist Dalai Lama?
Yeah, he's now a member of the alt-right.
That guy must have balls the size of Tibetan singing bowls. I really mean it.
He's got no fucks to give. He's coming back.
I know, he doesn't give a shit, man. He's a brave motherfucker.
So
he is a brave motherfucker.
There may be a few people who aren't up on the news on there. And Sven, why don't you tell our audience what he said?
He said that Europe is for Europeans and that the migrants should go home and build their own countries. I'm quoting the Dalai Lama.
Well, that's not a direct quote. That's a paraphrase. I think he said it in much more sort of like soft and peaceful, sort of beautiful Buddhist language. But it was very clear that he said, the
pretty close to that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was bang on, really.
Yeah, more or less. He just said, once the crisis is over, they should go back home because. Well, people don't like having their whole culture changed fundamentally.
It's not even that. I think that's something that he says out of compassion. He wants them to go back and fix their own countries.
Yeah.
The worst thing is that if all the smart people from your country leave and go to the West, then who's left behind to run the country that they're leaving? So.
Well, why doesn't he go? Why doesn't he get the fuck back to Tibet then? Oh wait.
Yeah, hang on.
Yeah.
Now, but
now you're banned in China, bro.
He's
banned.
It is an ethnic tribalism issue too, because we're seeing more and more and more, and we're seeing that this is the real fuel under the fire of the alt-right and the extremes, the extreme factions of the right wing, who are recognizing quite rightly that there is no country for white men in the current mainstream narrative. That people from African countries, people from Asia, Jews, lots of different tribes from different ethnic backgrounds are quite comfortable saying "my people" and saying "I'm proud to be Jewish, I'm proud to be Chinese, and I love my country, and China is for the Chinese, and Korea is for the Koreans, Japan is for the Japanese." But if you say that as a white person about countries that are predominantly white, and especially Britain seems to be going insane. Like, Britain is the source of, you could definitely make a case against white Australia because it's a colony, right? But Britain has a very, very long history of being a British country. and if you can't even say that, or present an argument to say that Britain is for the Britons, then why do we have the double standard, amongst different peoples? And maybe it's that the Dalai Lama is Tibetan, and he is, he has a strong sense of his own people, and he is able to recognize that people, birds of a feather tend to flock together. They work well when
he's
they're
an
with their own
outsider
people.
looking in. He's an outsider looking in, and he's able to see what's going on. But he's got a lot. I like the Dalai Lama. I've seen him on some panels, and one thing I really like about him is as a person who people look up to, he's never afraid to say, I don't know. Like, I've seen people have asked him questions, and he's said, he's given his perspective, and he says, I don't know, maybe more research is needed. And the people with that kind of gravitas don't usually do that. I think the thing about the whole migrant thing is, it's like the West is not under attack, it's committing suicide. We don't have a fundamental belief in the value of our own institutions that are worth valuing. Like, I mean, in the UK, the NHS and the BBC are seen, or at least until recently, have seen fundamental British institutions, but not capitalism. So, given we have a BBC, if we were a nationalised broadcasting agency, it would be running the free-to-choose documentaries by Milton Friedman. They'd be doing shows on Hayek and Mises, and talking about how free trade made Britain the richest country in the world. And we have people aren't standing up for the things that are worth standing up for in Western cultures. Then we spend ridiculous amounts of money locking up criminals, so-called, for victimless crimes. Okay, well, we can waste money doing that, and then we spend so much money bombing Muslim countries, destabilizing the region, making people hate us even more than they do, and then they flee those countries into Europe. It's absolutely crazy. At the same time, we don't open up free trade with the with the poorest countries in the world. We could be importing cheap goods from Africa, sending our money over there in exchange, helping those economies develop so that people don't feel the need to flee from those countries. We should be trading with the poorest countries in the world to bring up their standard of living so that there isn't this massive drive to escape and come over here. We should be going around the world extolling the virtues of free markets, because a bunch of African countries got worse until about the end of the 80s after the colonists left, because they tried their experiments with sultanism and Marxism, anything but capitalism. Why? Because capitalism was the system of the colonialists. So whatever we want, we don't want that, right? It wasn't until maybe the 90s that some of these countries started saying, well, you know what, maybe some free market. And it wasn't actually without Western aid. I mean, Western countries armed dictators in Africa, and one particularly egregious case, France backed the Hutu government in massacring about 1 million Tutsis over a period of a decade. So there was external influences that maybe exacerbated the situation, and yet some of the countries that were the most colonialized are doing a lot better than some of the countries that are least colonialized. So it's a whole combination of factors.
And it's not just a will to power from white people. That may be part of the equation, but it's not just will to power. It's also the development of innovations and technologies that can only emerge through decades or centuries of capitalism and free market in practice. Yeah.
And the regular people in Britain, for example, didn't benefit from colonialism. I mean, they had to pay tariffs on their grains at a time when grain was when bread was the majority of spending for people on low incomes. So they were being taxed for these colonial adventures. I'm sure some rich people benefited from the booty, but the average white person didn't benefit from colonialism. The government might have, the robber barons might have, but so it's a mixed bag. You could argue that our medical technology and things like that create medical technology invented in the West created population explosions in Africa. Arguably, it was that. It might just be that, I mean, we had a population explosion after our Industrial Revolution. All countries do. So that might not have been a good thing in some places where they were already having trouble feeding everyone to create a population explosion.
I think we can kind of tie this we can kind of tie this all back into where we started tonight with the drugs. And to me, it's like governments have an addiction to these sort of superficial fixes, and rather than recognizing that it's capitalism and sort of these Western values of individual freedoms is what creates the wealth in these Western countries, rather than exporting those values to these poorer nations, we like the solution from governments is just it's the solution that's suggested is just something that looks good and compassionate. It's just another addiction to virtue signaling. Let's bring them over here, and we can look like the saviors, and it's only making the problem worse. So it's just another addiction.
Yes, we should be setting a good example, and we should be offering to help educate people who want to follow the example, teach them how to do it.
And one of the most destructive things that the West does in places like Africa is just dumping all this foreign aid on them. And then again, it's just like, it's sort of on the macro scale. With individuals within a state, we have the welfare system, and that disincentivizes people from being self-sufficient if they know they're just going to get free handouts. So by the same token, if we're just dumping money in there, they don't have any incentive to build up their own countries and their own economies.
Yeah, and a lot of the welfare is basically corporate welfare for whatever the favorite color. Because we give you, we'll give you £1 billion, but you have to spend 700 million of it on British goods from these companies, And meanwhile, I think the African economist George Ayeti wrote a great book called Africa in Chaos 20 years ago. He was talking about at the time where the total aid to Africa was 30 billion a year, roughly, 400 billion was escaping Africa on corruption into Swiss bank accounts from these. So you're pouring you're giving rich people in poor countries money at the expense of poor people in rich countries, and often you're helping prop up dictators. So export ideas, please, not money.
Yeah, and lead the way, lead by example. And I guess it's important, and maybe this is a good place to wrap it up, to remind ourselves constantly that the way to navigate through all of these very complex problems in the world is with nuance, and to recognize that good can come from evil, and evil can come from good. That there's nothing like, take colonialism as an example that we look at. A great many evils were done in the name of spreading the British colony around the world, right? But if we fast forward to today and we look at, take our colony of Australia, for example. Yes, great atrocities have been done against the Aboriginal people, but Stefan Molyneux was recently out here, and he in his speeches at his tour made a very compelling case for the fact that, yes, there were atrocities, but there were atrocities happening before white people arrived here that far exceeded potentially the atrocities that were done against Aboriginal people. They were doing it to each other. The standard of living, the life expectancy, the health outcomes for many Aboriginals, not all Aboriginals, but for many Aboriginals is much, much better now. So there has been some good come from the evil of colonialism, just as, the good of Christian charitable values can also lead people into the delusion of socialism and ultimately communism. That is a great evil in itself. So we need to look at every problem and history with nuance and an understanding that nothing is all good or all bad.
And there's nothing worse in that front than colonialism, because you've got two narratives. One is that, we went over and we exploited these people and blah, 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 the one that most people believe. And then there's one from the alt-right, which is, they're lucky that we even stepped foot there. They were a bunch of savages. And neither's actually true.
Not wholly true for all cases.
No. There's plenty of examples of good and bad that have come. And, as you say, as you both alluded to, everyone's allowed their homeland apart from white people. I'm not a white nationalist, but I'm according to the alt-right, I'm not even white because I'm Jewish. So, but I do think they should slice a bit off America and give it to the white nationalists, so they can just go, right, there you go, there's your country, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But what I mean to say is that the Arabs took more slaves than Europeans did. It's just that they castrated their slaves and worked them to death.
Yeah.
So there's no black people in the Middle East to go pay us reparations. And yet, if you take your case with James, which you made, is why is everyone allowed to have a homeland except for white people? People say, well, whites have been the repressive race and blah, 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 blah. Okay, but, you don't hold Muslims to the same standard, even though they were even worse than white people were to their slaves. So a lot of nuance is necessary, and we can't fall victim to black and white narratives, although most people do because it's the easiest. And then once you get into a narrative, you keep on feeding yourself information that backs up your narrative. And and I always try and bring a little bit of nuance and more than one angle to these issues.
Indeed. Well, I think that's the way forward. That's certainly what we're aiming at The Rational Rise. We've been doing it for about 2 years, and it's steadily growing. And thank you to everyone at home who's tuning in for watching tonight and taking part in the conversation. I think we've been so riveted here with the three of us. We've neglected the comments section a little bit, but we'll catch up later on. And we invite you to share the video and like the page on Facebook. There's the James Fox Higgins show, which is my stream. There'll be a show from Sven emerging soon on The Rational Rise. We're getting lots of new people coming on board in the near future and lots more exciting interviews coming up. Antony Sammeroff, thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll give one more plug to your book.
Great.
Universal Basic Income, For and Against. Where will the people find it?
beyourselfandloveit.com/UBI. I would just like to thank you, James, for having me on your show. It's one of my favourite shows that I've done, certainly in a while. Sven, great to talk to you again. It's been a little while. And you keep the rational rising, please.
We'll certainly try. Thanks, Sven. Yeah. And thanks, everyone at home.
Thanks, brother.
All right, we'll see you guys soon. That's been the James Fox Higgins show for this week. Catch you later.
Man, we could...
Hey guys, this is James Fox Higgins for The Rational Rise. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. If you like the content we're producing, there are a number of ways you can support us to help us make more. Head to our website, therationalrise.com, to read our written articles, sign up to our mailing list, and to view the t-shirts, mugs, and other merchandise that we have for sale. We'd also love it if you'd become a Patreon supporter, and for as little as $5 a month you can donate to our project to ensure that we're producing content every week to stimulate your mind. You can also purchase a copy of my book, The Ghost of Emily, which is available in paperback and Kindle editions from Amazon right now. It's action-packed science fiction loaded with philosophy. Otherwise, just hit like, share and subscribe to make sure more people find out about our videos, and leave your comments below. See you next time.